5 minutes into the drive, I get pulled over. Man, I haven't been pulled over in years. And I might have been going 90. I was just like, man, I got to get to this conference. I don't know how I'm going to get there. And, it was new car, so you don't know how fast you're really going. It was wrong. It was wrong. I mean, I saw, I looked down. I was like, whoa, I'm going, 90. So I slowed down and then got pulled over. But he reminded me I was going 92. And so just confession time, since, Jason did his confession. Here's mine. But he let us go. That was awesome. I know. In Arkansas, state trooper, it was all, I was thinking, you one of them Chinese from California, and so I'm thinking there's no way I'm getting out of this one, but, we got out, and so here we are.
I knew he would have mercy on us.
Really?
Who would not have mercy after hearing your flight got canceled, and you're taking a rental car driving to Dallas? I thought that was good enough to get up.
An Arkansas guy wouldn't. I mean, you just always hear about those guys, like in the movies, that they don't like people from California. Anyways, here we are. That's the end of my confession. I haven't sinned other than that. No, it's just been a crazy trip, and yet I thank God that he got us here, and I don't know, even that video from Jason kind of got me thinking, because, that's when we used to hang out with Jason a little bit, and I think about, wow, it was during that period of time, and I don't think I ever seriously, just kind of asked him, hey, what's going on in your life? How is your walk with the Lord? You just make assumptions. And haven't we all done that, where you were with a couple and and you were hanging out with them for so long, and you didn't think to ask, and then suddenly that week everything fell apart and he's gone, and you're like, I didn't even think to ask. I just assumed everything was good. And sometimes even on your church staff or wherever it may be. And so I guess when I watched that video, the thought that came to my mind is, don't just get up there and assume, oh, these are the leaders. Oh, these are the guys that are setting the pace, and they've got their walk with the Lord. Their marriages are strong, and this and that and everything else, and just make these assumptions. Because, like Jesus said to the church in Sardis, he goes, you've got this great reputation. You have a reputation that you're alive, but you're dead. That's Jesus speaking. Okay, everyone thinks you're a certain way, but are you really that way? And, man, I got to just throw it out there and remind you, this isn't just about a marriage conference. Or getting a marriage ministry together. Not to belittle that, but it's kind of the whole theme of our book is, man, this is great. Yeah, let's enjoy each other. We were having a great time, and we want these happy marriages, and I hope you're having a great marriage, but there's something so much bigger going on. Like right now, there's a being up there who's looking at me right now. Like he notices me, and he knows what's going on in my heart. If I just want to be liked by you, if I want to be respected by you, or if I'm really here to say, no, he's so amazing, and we're going to face him. And he's done everything for us, and he's so much bigger than our marriage. That this book is not about marriage, okay? There's a couple verses in it about marriage, and yet we've got hundreds of marriage books. Okay, this book is about him, and this book is about a marriage between us and him. And even Ephesians 5 is not about this. It's not the miracle. The mystery isn't how a man and woman can become one. The mystery is Christ and the church. How in the world can God and I be connected right now? How in the world can one day he and I be married and have this marriage supper of the Lamb? That's what this book is about. And so even as we as leaders need to be very careful, we're walking on sacred ground, that we don't make marriage between a man and woman everything. This is a tiny, tiny piece that might give the world a glimpse of this future marriage that's to come. And so I got to ask you, is this right. I don't want to just assume, these are leaders. Of course they're all in God's word. You guys, are you really? Are you alone reading this book backwards, forwards, over and over again to figure out for yourself what is emphasized in this book? Mm-hmm. What is obvious and what is emphasized? Okay, that's so important this day and age, because there's so many false prophets, so many false teachers out there that can pick one word and exegete the heck out of it, and say, so this means, and pull a whole theology around it. But I'm just saying, just read it. Read it for yourself over and over and over again and say, what is emphasized? Because you can go to the Christian bookstore right now and support any view you want. If there's one thing I learned in seminary, it's that I can make this book say anything I want. Throw out a Hebrew word no one else knows better, and just make it say it. Pull one verse out of context, but when you read it over, my question is, what does it emphasize? What is obvious? Mm-hmm. And this is obviously not a book about marriage. Okay, so while I believe in marriage and I love marriage and and God created marriage, let's be careful also not to over-focus on the family.
Yeah, or allow marriage to become something that ends up being an idol in our life, right? Especially when you're in marriage ministry and you're talking to married people and you're dealing with married problems. It's very easy to lose sight of our greater purpose and how many times the Lord has to tell people all throughout the Old Testament and again in the New Testament, but he's constantly saying, return to me, don't forsake me, like it says in Jeremiah 2, the spring of living water. My people have forsaken me, and they're going after all these other things. And in the way that we counsel and push people in their marriages, it isn't so that they can be so perfectly united with one another. It's so that they can be right with Christ, and that is what's going to unite them.
Yeah, I mean, when we were talking about writing this book, it was in my head, I'm going, okay, do we really need 6,004 marriage books? Do I really need to write another one? But the point was, gosh, it's kind of a marriage book, and it's kind of not. I mean, it's about marriage in light of eternity, in light of this bigger picture. The passage that really, I've been having a hard time with words lately. It's bad for a speaker.
Was pivotal in your thinking?
Pivotal.
No.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's just the main verse that was, pivotal's good. Gosh, this has been happening just recently where obvious words are missing from my vocabulary. But it's the passage that I go, man, first of all, if you just wrote down, go through the Gospels and write down every time Jesus mentions family or husband and wife and marriage, just write down those verses and just start reading them. I think you'd be shocked, okay, at what he says about husband, wife, mother, children. It's interesting what we emphasize and what this book emphasizes. But there was a passage that really motivated me to, in writing this book, and it's out of 1 Corinthians 7. In 1 Corinthians 7, verse 29, he says, "This is what I mean, brothers. The appointed time has grown very short. From now on, let those who have wives live as though they had none. And those who mourn as though they were not mourning, those who rejoice as though they were not rejoicing, those who buy as though they had no goods, and those who deal with the world as though they had no dealings with it. For the present form of this world is passing away. I want you to be free from anxieties. The unmarried man is anxious about things of the Lord, how to please the Lord, but the married man is anxious about worldly things, how to please his wife, and his interests are divided. And the unmarried or betrothed woman is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to be holy in body and spirit. But the married woman is anxious about worldly things, how to please her husband. I say this for your own benefit, not to lay any restraint on you, but to promote good order and to secure your undivided devotion to the Lord. So Paul, who's the one who says, husbands, love your wives, also writes, those who are married should live as though they're not. Okay, we didn't see that verse as a theme of many marriage books. So I'm like, hey, let's do this. Those who are married should live as, and I get it. There are some people who are married and totally live like they're not in a sinful way. But sometimes we just swing this pendulum the other way. And what Scripture is saying, there's something so much bigger than your marriage. And the goal in life is to secure undivided devotion to the Lord. How can we get ourselves so that we are totally devoted to Him? And it talks about how the single person can be so focused, and that's exactly what we see. That's what we've been seeing, is we see these singles that are radical for the Lord, and then they get married. Then they get married and it just becomes so inward. It's like, well, we're dating and we're going to make a big decision. And so we don't want to get too involved in ministry. We want to stay focused and make sure I'm marrying the right person. And then, well, we just got married, so the first year of marriage really should be about us. We don't want to get too involved in marriage because that'll ruin things. And then because that first year is just about us, you're pregnant. And then it's like, well, we let's just get this first baby. I mean, we can't be too involved in ministry while we're having this baby. And, in those first couple years, we're adjusting to the new life with, little goo-goo, and then, after that, it's, it just goes on and on. Let me get my kids through adolescence. And, this is when we really got to hunker down as a family. And it just goes on until finally, okay, now they're out of the house. Now we can serve the Lord. It's like, really? Is that God's intention? That, okay, during those single years we can, or can there be this new generation of people who still live by faith? I understand it's more difficult. I understand as a single person, you go, man, if I die, I die. Big deal. Not that many people care, and they don't depend on me. And that's the way you start feeling like, you know what? I'm just in charge of me. And so if I get hurt, I get hurt. But then suddenly you're married and I go, okay, she depends on me. Now my life is somehow more valuable. Or now the kids depend on me. And what will it be like without a dad? And yet, you guys, we can't think like that. Man, we have to surrender every moment of our life. This book is about people who had insane faith that just says, you know what, I just go wherever God calls me to go. I do what I need to do.
Where is that passage in Luke where it's talking about the banquet when everybody was invited in? Is it 14?
14, yeah.
I was just reading it on the plane on the way here, and I was struck by, that passage when Jesus is saying, for those who don't hate their father, their mother, their wife, their children, they're not worthy to be my disciple. Read Luke chapter 9. Read Luke chapter 14 again to refresh your mind of just how strong Jesus speaks to us about being willing to let go of our lives and really surrender our lives to Him. It says in verse 20? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is the parable of the great banquet when, the master is telling his servants to go out and invite everyone. But in verse 20, another said, I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. So the servant came and reported these things to his master. Then the master of the house became angry and said to his servant, you know what? Go out quickly to the streets. Bring in the poor and the crippled and the blind and the lame. You guys know the story. I will fill up my house. There will be people who will say yes to me. But it's only a few verses later, down in verse 26, Jesus says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. I was thinking, man, there it is right there, that excuse. Well, I just got married. I can't not right now. The other person is like selling his land, or he's got a business deal going on. And God is like, are you kidding me? And Jesus is like, listen, your love for your family, for your husband, your wife, your children, that has to be lost in your love for me. You have to be willing to give up everything for me. That is going to mean that sometimes we're going to make decisions now together. We were just talking about it, that even are going to be uncomfortable and hard for our children. It's going to place them in a position of, wow, my parents love God more than me. And that is what we want to communicate with our lives. You know what? As hard as it is, we are God's and we are here for Him. So there should be many, many things in our life that don't make sense to them in their little minds, or don't make sense to those that don't belong to Christ, because they're thinking, why are you guys doing that? Why are you giving up your home, your comfort, your space, your time, whatever it is? It's because we know our hope is not for this life. We belong to Christ. Our life belongs to Him. We have a mission. If you don't, I think I'm just going to go straight into the amazing race.
You do.
Okay.
I told her, you just say what you need to say, and I'll work around it. Just like life.
It's rare. If I have a moment where my brain is functioning, I need to take it. One of my high schoolers and I, we love the show The Amazing Race, so we watch it on our little Hulu computer at night when all the little ones are in bed. And after a season or two, I was telling her, I am so struck at the spiritual significance of this show, because it's teams of two. If you've never watched it, that the two, sometimes it's husband and wife, it's brothers and sisters, whatever, but teams of two, they are on this race. They have to get from all these different places around the world, different checkpoints that they have to get to. The last one there gets eliminated. So, they are booking it. They are having to complete tasks together. There's work for them to do. There's assigned tasks. They rip it open. Okay, you got to do this. I got to do this. Go, And when they get to the checkpoints, they're so relieved. They can high five for a minute, take a temporary moment for victory, but then back in the race. Next day, what are we doing? We got to keep going. And I'm like, that is what our marriages should look like. We're in a race. That's a biblical example even Paul uses. Run this race with endurance. Throw off the sin that entangles you and keep going, running, because you have a goal in mind. For these people, they want to win $1 million. But we get something so much better than $1 million. We get to the end of the race and finally get into the presence of God and look at each other and say, we made it, we did it, we're tired, we're worn out, we sacrificed some stuff, and it was hard work, but then God says, well done, good and faithful servants. That's our goal. And if we live our lives with that in our mind, we are going to be doing things differently. We're not going to argue as much. Those teams that argue and bicker and fall apart, they're out of the race. But those teams that work together and remember what they're doing and remember why they're doing it, and they have the goal in their mind, they just are united. And it's like, yes, let's get on the race.
Yeah, it's the whole idea of, is there a point to your marriage? Is there a point to your life beyond just loving yourself and enjoying yourself? But are you here for something? And that's why I love that analogy that she brought up at some marriage conference. When she said it, she was like, man, I feel like our life is this long episode of The Amazing Race, that we don't even have time to celebrate the victories. It's high five, and let's go on to the next one. And then one day we're going to collapse into His arms. We're going to cross that finish line. And that's the idea, is this goal. I love what Paul tells Timothy. This is one of my favorite, maybe my favorite passage, 2 Timothy 4, at the end of his life, when Paul says in verse 6, I'm already being poured out as a drink offering. The time of my departure has come. I have fought the good fight. I've finished the race. I've kept the faith. Henceforth, there's laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have loved His appearing. Where Paul, at the end of his life, he goes, I did it. I finished the race.